So I have a couple questions as it relates to that. The one that was submitted, I'll use as the umbrella question, and I think then we'll be able to, dive deeper. What does global trade and compliance actually mean?
Okay. Well, in the Postal Service, we actually have a new organization. It's called Global Trade Compliance, and it's rather broad. I mean, you can actually look at that in a number of ways. But, okay, we start with our mailing regulations, okay, which we've always had. The package must be up to a certain weight or a certain size, and the address should be accurate and that type of thing. But now there are non-postal types of regulations. And
Such as what?
There've always been some,
okay,
but they've been expanded in recent years. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about global trade compliance. And there are some regulations concerning, for example, there are some countries which are embargoed. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So
and for those that don't know what that might mean, maybe
it means
example?
that you cannot mail to certain countries, or there are a lot of restrictions on what can be mailed, to those countries. So in a way, that's considered under the broad topic of global trade compliance.
Gotcha.
If you can't send to those countries, or certain types of things you can't send to those countries. In the last couple of years, and again, these are not necessarily U.S. Postal. These regulations don't originate with the U.S. Postal Service. They're U.S. federal government types of regulations, often with the State Department or the Treasury Department or Commerce Department. And in the last couple of years, there have been some new regulations that have come into play concerning when a package is sent from the U.S., the address, the name and the address of the recipient, and even the sender must be bounced off what's called a denied party screening list, which originates with the Commerce Department.
Right.
And so now every item that goes to the U.S. Postal Service that has a customs form on it, presumably, with some kind of a widget inside.
Well, I'm assuming that list is available electronically and can be processed as a suppressed file in some respects.
Oh yes, absolutely. There are ways to do that, and so, but that's something that didn't really exist up until a couple of years ago. But now, if there is a package that goes and it is going to someone who is on that denied party screening, on that denied party list, the U.S. Postal Service will capture that piece so it won't be dispatched. And then there's a process for dealing with it. You go back to the sender, and sometimes it's in error, or it's possible that the package was actually okay.
So in Mark's shop, do you catch it before it goes over to Barry's shop?
No, that's really up to him. We provide the data.
Okay.
We have to collect data from the shippers in two ways. We first have to vet them with the TSA, so the shippers themselves have to be approved to export by the TSA. We're talking about putting packages on commercial airliners, so they're very careful about that. Once they're vetted by the TSA and approved, every shipment they send has to be accompanied by an electronic manifest, which is a customs manifest, and it indicates every single package in a consolidated shipment, who it's going to, what the contents are, what the value. It's a customs declaration of sorts, and we submit that to the USPS when we bring the packages for export, and they're going to check that against the database that Barry had mentioned.
Okay.
So this is all under that original question of global trade compliance.
Exactly.
So it's multifaceted. And then there are other Treasury Department guidelines on the value of things that can, or of financial instruments. And I'm certainly not expert in this area.
I think Mary knows a little bit about this.
A little bit. I don't think anybody knows it all. But one of the things to remember is it's not just the U.S. government saying you can't do this. In some cases, it's the country on the other end saying we don't import Y.
Example, maybe?
A really strange one. You can't import salt to the Kingdom of Jordan. I don't know why you would, but so some of them are quite odd. But the lists are available. There are links somewhere on the USPS website. And also, Department of Treasury has a link of all of the sanctions programs and lists and lists and lists of individuals and companies and items and what is and is not allowed to be imported. In theory, before you make a sale, you're supposed to check the sanction list to make sure the company and the individual is not on that designated sanction list.
Okay, so to be unfair to Marty, is it possible for the software to actually validate that at the point of data capture?
to validate
Whether or not the individual is on one of these lists that's prohibited. So you could sort of flag, we can't accept this record because it's coming from a country or an individual that we can't ship to. So right up front, managing the expectation.
if it were hitting up on capture against a suppressed file at the data center, that the capture is utilizing the postal address file from a destination country, plus it can do address lookup on other suppressed files. So it's possible, it's necessary that those files are incorporated into the suppressed libraries.
Going back to Mary's comment about there are certain types of items which cannot be sent
Yeah, it's
to individual
fascinating.
countries. The Postal Service has a resource. It's the International Mail Manual, which is basically the
Okay.
big rule book for international mail. But there is a section, and it's online.
Good.
But there is a part of the International Mail Manual which is called the international individual country listings. So you can go to any country in the world, has a separate page. So you can go to Canada, and you will see the types of items that are not acceptable in Canada. And that isn't information that comes from the U.S. Postal Service. It's information that that country provides, and then we just publish it as a ready reference.
So is there more of an answer to the question? Did we answer it completely enough about what does global trade and compliance mean? Any other pieces that we ought to know?
Well, there are financial regulations that I'm not expert about. There are some limitations and restrictions on financial transactions, and all the customs types of restrictions. There are the trade restricts. Certain countries are embargoed. So there's more to it, and I guess no one, as Mary said, no one knows it all.
Yeah.
And, but it's a broad topic, but because of the increasing complexity, that's why we established an organization within the Postal Service that's called Global Trade Compliance now.
How new is it?
Oh, it's within the last year or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to thank you for that, because we obviously all need a lot of help.
Yeah.
We've been entirely focused about U.S. mailing outside, and I guess I want to just sort of take a moment to ask, what about all the other people in the world trying to mail into the U.S.? What kind of tips and tricks ought we to consider for that? Do you ever interact on that, from that perspective?
Well, we do import some mail and parcels. The balance of trade is far in favor of the U.S. exports, and I guess part of it is just because of the abundance of product and knowledge that we have here compared to other places. But there is mail that comes in, there are magazines that come in, and mail order catalogs that come in. I think without really understanding a whole lot about it, the restrictions are more here than they are in their country. They have to worry about customs coming in here. From a postal perspective, I guess Barry could probably answer better about things that come in written in foreign languages. I'm sure that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things we said about outbound really apply inbound in terms of addressing. We want, obviously, that they have to be accurate if you want the best delivery.
Sure.
If a piece coming into the U.S. was in kanji or Cyrillic, I don't think we would be able to deliver it very easily. we would not be able to deliver at all.
Somebody translate it for you.
Yeah. Although it is amazing sometimes that pieces that are not addressed correctly do somehow, get delivered. We certainly would never recommend it, and it'll often be delayed. But
I just assumed they'd use Google Translate.
yeah, with the volume of mail that we deal with,
that would be a big delay.
It'd be but again, on the customs side of things, and maybe something maybe we could have elaborated a little bit more a minute ago, is in regard to customs. There are customs thresholds, which means that every country has a value at which the items above that value will be charged the duties and taxes for that country.
So does that mean I need to put the receipt in, or is this a matter of perception?
There is a value requested on the customs form that's on the outside of the package. It is the commercial value. To Barry's point, it should be the commercial value. So if I'm selling somebody a book and that book is selling for $75, but it only cost me $10 to produce it, the value is not 10. The value is 75. Yeah. But some countries have very low thresholds. Canada
has a threshold of $20.
And what does that mean if I want to send something more than $20 worth?
You can certainly send it, but if it's over $20, the Canadian Customs Authority will apply the duties and taxes, to that item. If it's valued under $20, because it's not worth it to them, they would collect such a small amount that it's not worth the labor, to do that. And every country has a different customs, not every country, but they do vary considerably. So on the one extreme, it's funny, our two major, for USPS perspective, the two largest outbound destinations are Canada, number one, and then Australia, number
that's
two.
Interesting.
So Canada, the customs threshold is $20. So almost everything, will have a duty applied to it when it gets there. Australia, the number two country, their customs threshold is $1,000. Now it's 1,000 Australian, which has declined somewhat in value. It's about 900 roughly. But so there you see almost anything that would go through the Postal Service is under that value, and there is no duty or taxes applied to it. Inbound for the U.S., the customs threshold is $200.
So we're somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, and so it may be useful for customers to know when they're sending something to a country, what the customs threshold.
And is that on your website? Somewhere?
The Postal Service is moving into has some of that information available. I'm not sure we have it for every country. Sometimes it's useful to, I know like in Canada, if you go to the Canada Customs, it's the Canada Border Services Agency website. They have a whole page which talks about how they do that. And many countries now, because of the growth in e-commerce and because of the interest and questions in that, often the customs authority in a country will have that information posted on their websites as well.
Usually in the local language.
I think you can also get a lot of customs information from the U.S. Department of Commerce. If you're going to export and you want to know what the duty rates are and things. Sure. But it seems that most e-commerce companies today don't spend a lot of time worrying about that unless they're sending really expensive items.
Yeah.
From what we see, and if you look on their websites, they make it very clear that the consumer is responsible for any duty and tax that's due. So that becomes a function of the person who buys it needs to know what's going on.
It doesn't sound like a very good customer experience that I bought something and then later I got to pay more to the government for what?
Apparently the thinking is that foreign customers are accustomed to buying that way because they can't get it. They're buying here what they can't get locally, so they know what they're going to pay. And most often the duty rates are not that high. There are exceptions, but most of them are pretty nominal.
I think Mary wants to add a comment.
There was a UK study that on parcel delivery, that foreign parcel delivery incoming to the UK, that found that 70% of the rejections were due to customs. And I'm hearing rejection problems with that.
So if
from customers.
70% of the rejections are due to customs, can I guess that the other 30% is due to address quality?
I am never, ever going to guess why customers, and particularly customers in another country, might decline to accept a package. Not going there.
I agree with Mark that when customers purchase things from an international seller, I think they're generally aware that there is possibility of customs, duties and taxes being applied. I think oftentimes what happens is one of the reasons why they're buying from a seller in the U.S., for example, is that the actual price of the product is lower. Mm-hmm. And we often hear that customers will say that even if you factor in customs duties and taxes, that their total cost is still lower because the price of the product from the U.S. website is lower than what they would be paying locally in that market.
Right.
And plus, when they're buying from U.S. merchants, oftentimes the product range is much greater than they can get locally. We're such a big market. We have so many more choices that are often available in places where the population is not as great, and the number of choices available is smaller.
Okay, so